Money is the lifeblood of the Mafia. It wins friends, but it also attracts enemies. In Montreal, mob rivalries and divided loyalties have decimated a once proud crime family, the Cotronis. By 1980, the family's fate rests with an untested leader. Frank, the youngest Cotroni, will attempt to restore the organization to its rightful place in the underworld. A deadly power that has reigned supreme for almost half a century. The 1960s. Montreal is a city that comes alive at night, perfect for a young mobster on the prowl. Frank Cotroni, Le Gros, or the big guy, is a regular mug on the city's North End police blotters. A far cry from his shadowy brother Vic, the behind-the-scenes mastermind within the Montreal underworld.
Frank Cotroni was not the most sophisticated criminal in town. He was well known because Vincent Cotroni was there, his older brother was there before him, so he profited a lot off the reputation of his brother.
Vic was of the old ways, a mafioso from the ancient mountain villages of Calabria, Italy. The stiletto in the night, quiet and deadly. Since the 1940s, Vic has controlled Montreal from behind a thick veil of secrecy. Frank is younger by 20 years, reckless and brash, the product of a new and different world.
It's a really good point to think of Frank as more of a French-Canadian than an Italian, because he was younger than Vic. Vic was born in Italy, Frank was born in Montreal. I mean, different thing. Same parents, but totally different environment, really. And Frank was like a classic little brother. He just felt impulses, acted on impulses.
When you came to Vic Cotroni, he thanked you for bringing him whatever information you did. Frank Cotroni, you'd ask him a question, he would say, "What are you, stupid?" or something, you know what I mean? When you dealt with Frank Cotroni, you knew you were dealing with a mob guy. He made sure you knew it, and you knew it. When you dealt with Vic Cotroni, you thought maybe you're dealing with the Prime Minister of Canada.
Frank doesn't need polish in his line of work. He does the dirty jobs in the Cotroni family. He runs the street gangs, sends the muscle to collect on bad debts, and makes sure the Cotroni name is properly feared. At night, Frank plays up the swaggering young gangster, bodyguards in tow, a showgirl on each arm. He wants everyone to know who and what he is.
Frank Cotroni in Montreal reveled in his public appearance. I spent a night once with the police following Frank Cotroni in Montreal, and we went round to nightclubs, and it was just an exhibition of power and ostentation. Glad handing, the money being spread out, the drinks being paid for. I mean, when he walked in the club, everybody knew that he was there, and you could see that he enjoyed that public recognition.
If a job isn't exciting, it isn't worth Cotroni's time, and he will do a lot of time. A stretch for theft here, a few years for a scam there. It was all part of the life for the big guy.
A competent criminal is the one who is not busted. And Frank Cotroni was busted a lot of times.
Frank Cotroni is a mobster living every day like there's no tomorrow. That's why he was passed over by his brother in 1966 as the family's underboss. Vic chooses Paolo Violi, more traditional, more in his own likeness. Frank remains free to play the family's street-level rackets.
The best thing that ever happened for Frank Cotroni was not getting the promotion, so he can kind of muddle along in his own little criminal world, never reach the top, but always have something to do, always have a little fun, always have, a couple little scams here and there.
Frank Cotroni, he probably has more contact than anybody else in Montreal. But he didn't show the personal aptitude or quality or charisma that a godfather should have. Maybe he didn't have the chance to show it.
In 1973, Cotroni is unexpectedly launched into the big leagues. He's busted for cocaine trafficking in the U.S., and for the next 6 years will learn from the masters at Lewisburg Penitentiary.
When Frank got sent to an American penitentiary, that'd be the same as sending your smart kid to an Ivy League school.
Frank is a likable character. He likes to cook. He likes to, do things for the boys. There's a captain from a family in New York. There's a lieutenant from another family. And he gets to meet all of these guys.
By the mid-1970s, Lewisburg Penitentiary has become known as the Mafia Country Club. Lewisburg has been home to every major crime figure, from John Gotti to Jimmy Hoffa.
So many mob people end up in Lewisburg that they practically had a mob wing, They socialized, they ran their mobs from Lewisburg, really.
So all the contacts for the drugs, for the robberies, for any kind of crime that is related to organized crime, you got the answer over there. If you ask the question, it's a school.
Cotroni is growing up in Lewisburg, showing potential beyond a leg-breaking enforcer. As he learns the ways of international organized crime in jail, one teacher stands out. Carmine Galante, a man who's been locked up since the early 60s for his leading role in the French Connection drug ring.
I think Carmine Galante was influential on Frank Cotroni and a lot of other people. I think it went without saying that you can't be an idiot around this man. This isn't someone you trifle with, and if he takes you in, you have to play by a higher standard. You're strutting around with Carmine Galante, other people take you a lot more seriously.
The fact of the matter is he was a psychotic killer. I mean, that's how he got started. He's known for being a ruthless killer. And he was terribly feared by everyone.
In 1974, Galante is released into society. He has one goal: to be crowned the boss of bosses. Those in his corner could do very well. Few more than Frank Cotroni. Within months of his return to New York, Galante has slaughtered his way back to the top, with 40 reported hits. He retakes the old French Connection heroin trade routes. His allies in Montreal, the Cotroni family, are willing partners ready to help.
Montreal was port of entry to the States. And also it was a city very attractive. For drug traffickers for years, Montreal Harbor was a safe place to ship drug. It was easier to ship that to Montreal and then use the road to go to New York. So Montreal was really the place if you were a drug trafficker.
Resurrecting the old heroin trade route will put the Cotronis back on the international drug trafficking map. But the Cotroni family is under siege, exposed in a public crime probe. Vic's health is failing, and the police are closing in. Worse, the acting boss, Paolo Violi, and his enforcer brothers have been murdered by enemies within the organization.
After the 3 Violis were killed in Montreal, we can say that there was no leader. Vic Cotroni was sick. The others were out of business. There was no successors.
After Violi dies, there really isn't much of a Cotroni family. It becomes a much smaller organization, and the Sicilian Mafia take over.
Frank Cotroni's time nears. For now, he can only wait. Sicilian families dominate the Calabrian Cotronis. Vic is old, powerless, and isolated since he has been forced out.
His world had changed. He could no longer be the retiring, behind-the-scene head of an organized crime family. He was very visible. He had constant police efforts to lock him up. He was under tremendous pressure from police investigations, courts, testifying. He'd lost his position of eminence and really untouchability that he had.
Now Frank, once the black sheep of the family, is the only one who can rescue what's left of the Cotroni legacy.
All the followers of the Cotronis were waiting for Frank Cotroni to get them back in business, back on the forefront. They were expecting a lot of Frank Cotroni.
He caused Buffalo, he caused other families, and we realized that he's more or less have convinced these people while he's in jail that he could run his own show.
Frank Cotroni is paroled and deported from the U.S. in early 1979. For the cameras, he makes a confident show of his homecoming.
He knew when he was waiting for activity, for a certain amount of flair, for energy. You know, they got that. He did have a tie with serious bikers. He did have a very good tie with people bringing up drugs from Colombia. Very good ties with French-Canadian gangs.
If Cotroni's capture of the bread-and-butter rackets is brisk, his important new ally in New York is moving at a breathtaking pace. In the past year, Carmine Galante has seized power in New York. Hungry for more, he declares himself the Mafia's boss of bosses. But there are those who think he has gone too far.
There was a massive change internationally in the underworld. And this was the arrival of the Sicilian Mafia. These are the real boys. These aren't guys who are local homegrown gangs that emerged into criminal organizations. This is a true criminal juggernaut. Nothing stands in their way.
Galante craves the absolute power of the old dons, but his lofty ambition will cost him his life.
I think Galante showed that, how things change, how you turn, new chapter starts in the Mafia. You basically have to kill the guy. You're not going to negotiate with him.
It takes a huge amount of intelligence to run a family. And to have longevity in a family. You just can't be feared. You can't just kill people because you'll end up dead. Carmine Galante is a good example of that. He was just feared, and so someone just took him out.
Galante's murder makes Frank Cotroni suddenly vulnerable as well. He has lost his strongest ally, and his older brother Vic has officially retired. With his instincts for the street, Frank knows he'll have to send a clear signal that he is to be both respected and feared. By the late 1970s, the Cotronis are on shaky ground. Vic's health is failing, and turf wars have sapped the family's wealth. Frank is forced to act.
You have to remember, all organization, all the members, they only focus on one thing, money. And they will interfere with the people who stop them to make them the money. This is that's the name of the game,
Michelle Fatso Marion is Frank's first target. Marion murdered 2 Cotroni soldiers and cut off an important money supply, all while Frank was in prison. But who to trust to do the job? He looks outside the Italian Mafia to a French Canadian, someone who has no ties to his enemies.
Réal Simard was the nephew of Vic Cotroni's associate. So Réal Simard was already in the family of the Cotronis because of his uncle. So it was easy for Réal Simard to get acquainted to Frank Cotroni.
You have to realize that Frank Cotroni is French-Canadian. He was born in Montreal. He was born in a French section of Montreal. He was brought up in a French section of Montreal. The people that years later followed him, he knew them and he made contact with them in that neighborhood.
Réal Simard grew up in the same part of town. He's already served time for bank robbery and extortion when he comes to Frank's attention.
And he started by taking him only as a driver. But Simard is a very egocentric, he's a very proud person. You know, sometimes you're only the driver, but you act as you would be his bodyguard, you act like you would be his confidant.
He's a person that is real friendly. If you're his friend, you're his friend. He's very close and he's very loyal.
At 29, Simard rises through the ranks from driver to enforcer.
Réal Simard decided early in life that he would want to live that type of life. And he works at it. And he becomes very good at it.
In the summer of 1980, Cotroni tells Simard, "It's time for you to take a very big step. Michel Fatso Marion, the man ripping Frank off, will be Simard's bloody initiation as mob hitman." During Cotroni's prison years, he's heard it all, including the art of the perfect hit, lessons he'll now pass on to Simard, how to set up the target, and making a clean hit. "You must weave a spider web," Frank tells him. "Never leave the body without the coup de grace, a final bullet in the head."
Frank is a very cunning fellow in some ways. He could run a school of how to kill someone, how to trap them. Once you've got them, make sure you put an extra bullet in the head to make sure they're dead. That's the sort of thing he was good at.
Frank Cotroni needed guys like Réal Simard to do errands and nasty things. That's the role of a soldier. The boss is ordering things, and guys like Réal Simard are doing it.
Simard stakes out Marion until he knows his target's every move. His first hit is unhesitating, professional in every way. A stone-cold killer is born.
That was what he had to do to be recognized in the organization, and he would have done anything, including killing people, which he did. And everybody was looking up at Réal Simard because of what he was doing for the organization.
For the Mafia, murder is the most effective demonstration of loyalty. And Simard proves his allegiance many times over in the coming years.
The people Simard killed would have killed Simard. Like he wasn't shooting nuns in the church. He wasn't shooting little girls at a brownie meeting. He was shooting people who did nasty things too.
By the early 1980s, Frank has proven to the Montreal underworld that the Cotroni family is not to be trifled with. Simard has become Cotroni's most trusted soldier. They call each other uncle and nephew. Réal Simard has found his family.
I think Simard had a real need to be a part of something bigger. Simard needed a father figure, and Cotroni liked to have younger people sort of playing up to him, and so I think there was a they both saw something they needed.
Cotroni's new nephew and hitman is eager to destroy his new family's rivals and betrayers. One key target is the man who holds the family's purse strings. Michel Posa has been the Cotroni financial wizard for more than a decade, but Frank suspects him of double dealing, of cutting the Cotronis out of money laundering schemes.
They always felt that Posa was working for and doing more for other organizations, and they felt that more or less that he was a traitor.
Frank can't just kill someone of Posa's importance. Even though Vic is out of the business, he needs the blessing of the old godfather before making the move on Posa.
Simard, he went with Frank to the house of Vincent, who was retired at the time. When Vincent started to talk about Michel Posa, he told Frank, "Come with me and you stay in the kitchen." They've talked in Italian in the living room. When they came out, there was a complete other subject that they were talking about. But when he got into the car, Simard, he was the driver, Frank was sitting beside him. The only thing he told him, "Michel has to go. We've decided so tonight."
Simard is dispatched to pay Michel Posa a visit. For years, Posa has been the target of police investigations for his known Mafia connections. He's under almost constant surveillance. Simard waits for just the right time to strike.
Real Simard turned into a very, very efficient killer, and not the type we think of. I mean, he wasn't someone, tough-looking, intimidating, that sort of thing. He was, a gentleman. He could eat with someone, joke around, share fine wine, and then leave and shoot him. Michel Posa was killed not because he was threatening, not because he was nasty. He was killed because he was a very, very good accountant who liked to work for a lot of very bad people.
When police arrive at the crime scene, they are puzzled. Why was Michel Posa whacked? Despite being an organized crime, he had no known enemies. The answer is in Posa's briefcase, and it will trigger a chain of events that will bring Frank Cotroni and Montreal to the attention of the man the Mafia fears most. News of the murder of a money launderer in Montreal reaches Palermo, Sicily. It piques the interest of Judge Giovanni Falcone, the heroic man leading the struggle against organized crime.
Judge Falcone was an investigating magistrate. He had the vision, he had the strategy. He initiated the biggest assault to the power, international power of the Mafia on both sides of the Atlantic. I remember clearly his message. The Mafia is not a curse from God. It's a human phenomenon. Like all the human phenomenon, it was born and it can die. That was his mantra, his vision, his strategy.
The papers found in Michel Posa's briefcase arrive on Falcone's desk. Powerful, damning evidence. They prove the existence of a massive money laundering scheme that stretches from Sicily to Montreal. Cotroni is now part of the international network that Falcone is determined to destroy.
It was of extreme interest to him because it showed that Money was going across the ocean, big connections that this dumpy-looking little guy in Montreal has ties to extremely crooked politicians in Palermo.
In Montreal, Frank Cotroni does not yet realize the importance of the Posa papers, but he knows the murder is generating heat. He must get Simard out of town. He sends him to a place where he can hide and at the same time expand the family business.
Toronto's always been kind of a prize. Everybody wanted it, but nobody could have it.
Yeah, I think there were a lot of things going on when Frank Cotroni sent Réal Simard to Toronto. I think part of it was just Cotroni's recognition that Toronto is a huge, largely untapped business center. There's lots of money to be made here.
He's always had a tie to Toronto through the drugs, and I think he just likes Toronto. His name carried a lot of weight.
He would have a lot more credibility probably coming to Toronto. And this is why Simard was sent, to prepare the grounds that he comes over.
Frank Cotroni will exploit this new territory for drug trafficking. He elects Réal Simard to lead the operation because he trusts him most. He also looks respectable, a new face to organized crime.
He didn't fit the image in my mind when I first met him of a hitman. He calm, cool, collected, that part of it, yes, but he was a real ladies' man, good-looking, tall, well-built, nice smile on his face, very friendly.
The Don of Ontario, Johnny Pops Papalia, is Simard's first contact. Papalia can't believe that this pretty boy is connected, let alone to the Cotronis.
I think Réal mentioned to him at that time that we have a friend in common. And John said, and who would that be? And he referred to Frank Cotroni. And Papalia sort of smirked, and he says, you know Cotroni? And as Réal related to me, he said, yeah, I do. He said, well, let's go across the street and phone him right now. As soon as he made the call, Simard was John's best friend for that moment, because he did, in fact, represent Frank Cotroni, which basically indicated to me that Cotroni had something over John Papalia when it came to control.
Simard moves into an upscale Toronto hotel. He takes on a new name and sets himself up as a legitimate entrepreneur, supplying girls and his marketing skills to dozens of the city's strip joints.
I think also we just saw that there's a way more business-like way of running it. Like, I think a lot of them were kind of run like almost like old saloons, and he had seen the way that places on St. Catharines and Montreal were run, and he just knew that there's a better way of doing this. People will pay a lot more, that you can aim a little more for upscale clients.
Simard reports back to Cotroni. It's incredible the money we can make here, Uncle. They're just not organized in Toronto. We just have to keep up our respectable front, and it'll go like crazy. It's not long before the police connect the brash newcomer with the Cotroni organization. They send an intelligence report to the Ontario Attorney General, warning of the Cotroni family's growing interests in Toronto.
Obviously, from a policing standpoint, the topless dancing is one thing. It's the other crimes that are related to it. The drug crimes. The females are transient. They're back and forth between the two provinces, moving from tavern to tavern. They in themselves become a pretty good network to move drugs, anything you want to move, counterfeit money, stolen goods.
Despite their efforts, the police failed to tie the new flow of drugs into the city to Frank Cotroni.
Frank was the biggest name that I was involved with. I met him on the street once, and we talked. And he would say, Mario, you'll never catch me. Because I'm I'm leaving this world, and I would say, Frank, you can't, and I will get you one day. And that's what's part of the deal.
Frank is starting to look more like a businessman than a mobster, more like his cagey brother Vic. By the early 80s, he has really grown into the job. But he has made one terrible mistake. Within a year, Frank Cotroni's nephew has expanded the Cotroni family's drug trade into the largest city in Canada, a prize that must be protected. In the fall of 1983, another French-Canadian drug ring begins eyeing Toronto's riches. Réal Simard resorts to his true calling. But Simard breaks the essential rule and fails to deliver the coup de grace. He leaves one of his victims, Robert Haytu, still alive.
So happened that I'm here in Toronto. I'm with the OPP office, and I told the OPP officer, I said, let's go to the hospital. I want to see this guy. I didn't know Etu. Etu knew me. So as soon as I came into the room, he was all plugged up, but he recognized me. His body language told me that he wanted to tell me something. So I started asking questions, and we finally found out. I finally identified that one of the guys that had done this to him was Réal Simard.
Pretty quickly, police have an idea of who Simard is. All of a sudden, they've got a tight line, basically an entree into this huge criminal family.
If the Montreal police had wanted to get down the Frank Cotroni's organization, they would have put a guy like Réal Simard within the family. They would have encouraged Frank Cotroni to pick a guy like Réal Simard, because Simard was a flashy guy, a guy who wanted to impress, but he was not the solid mafia guy or even the solid criminal like he pretended he was. That's why when he was busted, he fell, all his life crumbled.
The police believe they can flip Simard, convince him to rat out the Cotroni family. In Sicily, Judge Giovanni Falcone has found his turncoat. Tommaso Buscetta, international drug lord, has turned informer after a rival gang murders 14 members of his family, women and children included.
Tommaso Buscetta opened up the secret world of the Mafia as never before. When he decided to turn as informant, he revealed all the secret of the Mafia, the structure, the mentality.
Buscetta's evidence is devastating. A dragnet sweeps up 800 mafiosi and scores of politicians and policemen on the take. Falcone leads a grueling series of maxi trials with hundreds of defendants hissing and spitting from specially constructed courtroom cages.
Falcone was the symbol of the fight against organized crime. When he was a magistrate in Sicily, he was happy to see that the reaction of the people. He used to say that they support us. We are changing the perception of the Mafia. People start to realize that the impact of the Mafia is in everyone's life.
By 1987, Falcone wins convictions against 338 Sicilian mobsters. Their sentences total an astounding 2,665 years for crimes ranging from criminal conspiracy to murder. Buscetta's bombshell reverberates as far away as Montreal. Armed with information, Falcone travels to New York and Montreal. With Buscetta's revelations, the Italian judge amasses a case against every major crime family, including the Cotronis. But they can't reach Vic Cotroni. At 74 years of age, the Godfather passes away from cancer.
When you are involved in organized crime and you die in your own bed, it's because you got the respect of everybody. The one who doesn't have the charisma, who doesn't have the respect, they die by the knife or by the gun. But Vincent, he had the respect of everybody all the time that he was in the organization. And that's probably why he was able to die in his bed.
Devastated, Frank throws what was the last of the big mob funerals, a tribute to the man who built and ran one of North America's most successful crime families.
There was so much respect from all elements of the underworld in Canada. I mean, huge contingent came from Ontario, some came from all over the States, Italy.
They had lost a great friend. They had lost a great boss. They were there to salute Vincent Cotroni, but also they were there kind of saying it's too bad that's the end of an era.
It was the end of an era, but we still had targets to work toward getting. And my target was still Frank Cotroni.
The police have never been able to pin a big conviction on Frank Cotroni. But Falcone got Buscetta to talk. And in Montreal, they think they have their stool pigeon.
I knew the man. I had listened to that man on electronic surveillance for years. I had physical surveillance on him. I knew I had videotapes on him. I knew how he conducted himself. I knew the man.
To catch Frank Cotroni, the police will tighten the screws on Réal Simard. Réal Simard stews in prison, a life sentence for murder hanging over his head. He faces a tough choice.
I wrote the story that Réal Simard is really embarrassing the whole family because everybody expects that he will testify against Frank Cotroni. At that time, everybody in town were telling me that you're wrong, Réal Simard is a strong guy. He will never betray Frank Cotroni.
Our first conversation was, I can't do that. I will never do that. Well, I said, Réal, if you don't talk to me, the next one is murder. You're going to be convicted, and you're going to do 25 years. When you come out of prison, I'll be long gone from the police department, and you're going to be an old man. This is your chance.
I think Réal Simard is someone who needs to be stroked a bit. I think Réal Simard is someone who needs to feel a part of something. I think he's also, and I mean, don't want to take this too far, but he's someone who needs a certain meaning to his life, and if his meaning's being a gangster, then he'll be a gangster. If his meaning's being some force for police, he'll be the force for police.
After 8 months, Simard cracks. He confesses to 5 murders and is prepared to tell all he knows of the Mafia's activities in Canada. Frank Cotroni is taken into custody and forced to confront Réal Simard.
We had a scenario, and we put the two together because we wanted to know the reaction. If you would tell him, don't say anything, be careful, the lawyers, you know, we wanted to know what would happen.
It only takes Frank a few seconds before the impossible sinks in. He has been ratted out. He refuses to talk, but it doesn't matter. Simard has already given the police everything they need.
I've questioned people a lot of my life there, and you see when they are stunned, you know. It was heavy for him to accept that, you know, because he must have said, gee whiz, what do they have against me?
I think Réal Simard really hurt Cotroni. You know, criminals have emotions like everyone else, but I think the loyalty among criminals plays better on movies than it does on the streets. I mean, I think if these guys want loyalty, they should look to their kids or their dogs, and they're not going to get it from their colleagues.
Frank Cotroni is arrested for manslaughter. He has been betrayed by his most trusted soldier, the man he considered his nephew.
Recruiting Simard was good, but giving him the order directly was a mistake. If he would have put some people between, some buffers that we call, he wouldn't have gone to prison probably.
What happened within Frank Cotroni's organization, what was happening in Italy with Tommaso Buscetta and the others. It was part of the new phenomena of crook who prefer to deal with the authorities than to go to jail.
The Cotroni family's disarray mirrors the larger scale of troubles for the Mafia in Sicily. Judge Falcone has done his all to rid this blight on society, but the Mafia is resilient and treacherous. Money and blood attract a new generation. In 1992, they make an example of Falcone.
It was a sad moment. I flew to Italy and I went to see his remain, his car. It was probably one of the saddest moments of my life. He was a brother. He was an inspiration for me. I knew that that was his destiny, and he was going through his death.
When the whole organization of the Mafia started to be on the spotlight, and that it changed, people were no more feeling that they were men of honor after the killings of Judge Falcone.
For 3 decades, the Cotroni family had reigned supreme in the Montreal underworld, but now little is left. Frank has failed to return his family to power.
He had the respect of a lot of French Canadians, but not the kind of respect that a real godfather is supposed to have.
Respect is the most important. And if you have that, you won't have people ratting out on you. See, the things that mafia bosses, organized crime people have to worry about, number one, is people in their own ranks who for their own needs or their own selfishness will rat you out.
This is the story of his criminal life. And if you look at the real mafia, they don't get involved others than their own people. And if you look all the people who was around him, during all the years that he was free and having a criminal life, most of them were French-Canadian criminals. And if you look in the story of the Mafia, their historic background, it has to be in the family.
Frank Cotroni has learned the bitter lesson of betrayal. Real Simard has disappeared into the Witness Protection Program, while Cotroni ponders his fate in jail.